The sun was beginning to set over the southern coast of Australia on a quiet Saturday evening in October. For 20-year-old Frederick Valentich, it seemed like the perfect night for a routine training flight across the water. He climbed into his light Cessna 182 and prepared to cross the Bass Strait toward King Island. The weather was clear and the visibility was excellent as he departed from Moorabbin Airport near Melbourne. Frederick was an enthusiastic pilot who loved being in the air more than anything else. He had no way of knowing that this short trip would soon become one of the greatest aviation mysteries in history. The first part of the flight was completely normal, and Frederick stayed in constant contact with air traffic control. He maintained a steady altitude and reported his position as he moved away from the coastline. The vast stretch of ocean below him was dark, but the stars above provided a bright guide for his journey. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the radio crackled to life in the Melbourne Flight Service Center. Frederick asked the controller if there was any known traffic in his area below 5,000 feet. The controller, Steve Roby, checked his records and confirmed that there were no other aircraft scheduled to be in that sector. Frederick responded with a hint of concern in his voice. He told the controller that he could see a large aircraft moving below him. He described it as having four bright landing lights that were impossible to miss against the dark horizon. The controller asked for more details about the mystery craft and its current position. Frederick explained that the object had just passed over him at a very high rate of speed. He struggled to identify the type of aircraft because it was moving much faster than any civilian plane he had ever seen. For a few moments, there was silence on the radio as the controller tried to find the object on radar. He saw nothing on his screen except for the single blip representing Frederick's Cessna. There were no other signals and no other pilots in the area reporting unusual activity. Frederick called back, and his voice sounded increasingly stressed. He said the object was now approaching him from the east and seemed to be playing some kind of game. It would vanish for a second and then suddenly reappear on the other side of his cockpit. He told the controller that the object was orbiting him at high speed. It had a shiny, metallic surface that reflected the lights from his own instrument panel. He noticed a strange green light emanating from the craft that gave it an eerie and unnatural glow. The controller asked Frederick to confirm his altitude and if he could see any identifying marks on craft. Frederick replied that he was still at 4,500 feet and that the object was hovering directly above him. He noted that it was long and sleek, but he could not see any engines or wings. At this point, Frederick's engine began to cough and sputter. He reported that the Cessna was idling roughly and that he was losing power. The panic in his voice became much more evident as he tried to keep his plane in the air. He told the controller that his engine was struggling and that he was going to try to reach his destination. The object remained right on top of him, matching his every move with impossible precision. It did not seem to be affected by the wind or the laws of physics that governed Frederick's small plane. Frederick's final words to the control tower are some of the most chilling ever recorded in aviation history. He stated clearly that the object was not an aircraft. He repeated this twice, his voice trembling as the sounds of his struggling engine filled the background of the transmission. Immediately following this statement, a strange metallic scraping noise was heard over the radio. It sounded like heavy pieces of metal grinding against each other with great force. This sound lasted for 17 long seconds before the radio went completely silent. The controller tried repeatedly to re-establish contact with the young pilot. He called out Frederick's call sign over and over again, but there was no response. The only thing coming through the headset was the hiss of static from the empty air over the Bass Strait. An intensive search and rescue operation was launched within the hour. Australian authorities sent out multiple aircraft and ships to scour the area where the radio signal had cut out. They hoped to find a crash site or a life raft floating in the dark water. The search continued for several days and covered thousands of square miles of ocean. Teams used advanced sonar and visual scouts to look for any trace of the Cessna or its pilot. Despite their best efforts, they found absolutely nothing in the deep blue waters. There were no oil slicks, no pieces of white plastic, and no signs of a struggle. It was as if the entire airplane and the man inside it had simply ceased to exist. The lack of physical evidence made the mystery even more unsettling for the investigators and the public. As the news of the disappearance spread, witnesses from across the region began to come forward. Dozens of people claimed they had seen strange lights in the sky on the very same night Frederick vanished. Many of these reports describe a fast-moving object with a distinctive green light. One group of witnesses reported seeing a large metallic craft hovering over the water near Cape Otway. They claimed it stayed there for several minutes before shooting upward at an incredible speed. Their descriptions matched the details Frederick had provided in his final radio transmission. Skeptics tried to find a logical explanation for what had happened that night. Some suggested that Frederick had become disoriented and was flying upside down. They argued that the lights he saw were actually the reflection of his own plane in the water. Others theorized that he might have staged his own disappearance to start a new life. However, his family and friends insisted that he was a stable young man with no reason to run away. He was also a passionate pilot who would never have abandoned his aircraft in such a dangerous way. The Australian Department of Transport eventually closed the investigation. Their official report stated that the cause of the disappearance could not be determined. They admitted that the strange radio transmissions and the lack of wreckage were highly unusual. Over the years, many people have analyzed the 17 seconds of metallic noise at the end of the recording. Some believe it sounds like the Cessna's engine failing under extreme pressure. Others think it sounds like the hull of the plane being manipulated by an external force. Frederick's father remained hopeful for many years that his son might one day return. He built a memorial at Cape Otway overlooking the water where the flight ended. It stands as a reminder of the night a young man met something he couldn't explain. The case of Frederick Valentich remains one of the most famous unexplained disappearances in the world. It is frequently cited by researchers who study the intersection of aviation and the unknown. The transcript of his final words continues to haunt those who listen to it today. There are no easy answers to be found in the official files or the ocean depths. We are left only with the testimony of a pilot who saw something that shouldn't have been there. He spoke his truth until the very moment his voice was taken away by the silence. Some secrets are kept by the stars and others are hidden beneath the waves of the sea. Frederick Valentich flew into the heart of a mystery and never came back down to earth. We may never know if he found what he was looking for in the dark sky that night.